a leading competing philosophy at this time. This was kind of like for the intellectual Greeks that wanted to live moral, ethical lives. They wanted a sense of spirituality, but they certainly didn't want some Jewish cult, some Jesus character. And so the guy who developed this was called Plotinus. And Plotinus developed a system which later be called Neoplatonism, or like new Platonic thought. And Plotinus wanted to take Plato's thoughts, but do kind of like a new and improved version of them. And he kind of solved this issue about he's firmly places these ideal forms in the very mind of God. They're not separate from God, but they are in God. And he taught what is called emanation. And this is very different than from creation or evolution. And emanation is more like a fountain, like where you have water percolating out and then cascading down into all its surrounding. Or you could think of like a wood burning stove or a fire. The closer you are to the fire or the stove, the more light and heat there is, and the further away you move from it, the darker and colder it gets. Well, in this analogy, God is the source of all life and light. So the closer you are to God, the more being, the more life and light you have, and the further away you move from God, the less being or the less light and life you have. And so this led to the development of what was called the Great Chain of Being. And that's the first big slide I want to show for you today. And this became kind of like the model for medieval Christianity, because what ended up happening was you ended up getting this hybrid of Christian thought, Greco-Roman, Hebrew thought, but then it syncretized with Greek philosophy, especially in Neoplatonism. So you end up getting a lot of these Neoplatonic thoughts woven into medieval Christian theology. And so this is what the hierarchy looks like for Plotinus. And once again, I would draw a simpler version if I had my whiteboard, but this is from like a medieval manuscript. It even looks like there's a little blood on it, which is fantastic. So here at the center of all things, and you could draw this a lot of ways. You could draw it as like a ladder with God on top, or you could draw it as like a target with God in the center, but you could also have God on the outside, and we'll talk about that later. But in this model, they have it like a ladder, and this is called, you can see the chain coming down from God all the way down. This looks like hell down here and into non-being. So this represents God the Father with the Trinity. And he is the source of all life and light. But then below God, we have this being called the demiurge. And the demiurge means the craftsman in Greek. And this is the being that made the physical material world. So we have God, the demiurge, and then we have this range of angelic host. The fallen angels, of course, is what we would call demons that were cast into hell or will be cast into hell in the future. Below the angelic realm, we get to human beings. And I'm assuming this is Mary and baby Jesus down here. But here we have the host of humanity. Now, humans are in a really interesting place, because at this line, if I was drawing this on the whiteboard, I would put a dividing line right through humanity, because everything above this line is spiritual and everything below this line is material. Humans are such a unique aspect of creation because we have physical material bodies that are indwelt by spiritual beings. Okay, trippy. Then we move down to animals, which at least in Neoplatonism are seen as just being material beings, not having a soul, not having a spirit. All soul spirit stuff is happening up here. Down here, we're just talking about physicalism or materialism. So here you have the animals, then you get down to the plants, then down to minerals, and I would replace hell here with simply non-being. But in this place, they have hell. And so you see this hierarchy going on, and you can have sub-hierarchies, right? So like in the angelic realm, you can have archangels, you could have seraphim, cherubim, down to your everyday run-of-the-mill angels, even with humans. Depending on your point of view, human societies and cultures in the past have had a hierarchy of human races, believing some races are more dominant than others. And even though, once again, this is not the class we're doing, basically what Charles Darwin did in his Origin of Species, he used this model of the great chain of being, but since he was a materialist, he didn't believe in anything above this human line. So he basically just got rid of this whole top half of the chain, and man now becomes the highest evolved being that came from non-being, single-celled organisms. So basically, this is the Darwinian or evolutionary tree of life if you start at the bottom and work your way up, with man being the most evolved being, which is just, once again, the opposite or an inverted mirror of the Neoplatonic view of everything cascading from God down. In Darwinian evolution, you have non-life creating life, going all the way up to Adam or to man, and then stopping there. You can have hierarchy of animals, of trees, of minerals, etc. So this is where we get this idea of, and once again, the closer you are to God, the more real, the more being you have, and the further away you move from God, the less being you have. This is one of those things that has permeated the Western psyche and the way we think. I mean, think about your own thinking and how you value things. I mean, do you think humans have more value than animals? Do you think animals have more value than plants? Do you think some plants have more value than other plants? Like, is a redwood tree greater than a scrub oak or than a fungi? Are some minerals greater than others? Are diamonds or platinum, titanium better than loam and dirt? And so that's kind of like his thinking.